Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar on how to embed a culture of privacy. I'm Steve Wright, your host and moderator for this afternoon. I am absolutely thrilled to bits to welcome three absolute winners in this industry, people who have got massive amounts of experience of implementing this. I would like to introduce them. First is Agnes, who on my screen is just above me. Hello, Agnes. Good afternoon. Agnes is a data protection officer, passionate about new technologies, ethics, and currently serving as a global workforce solutions company called Manpower. We're all very familiar with Manpower. It's been around all my life. She's recognised as a finalist at the Picasso Awards Europe last year for her significant contributions to promoting a culture of privacy. Welcome this afternoon, Agnes.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for having me today.
Delighted. Thank you for joining us. My next guest is Andrew Hunter. Andy works mainly for a membership organisation that provides benefit to its members, from discounts to third parties, to events to run holiday parks, spa hotels, holiday cottages, health clubs, wedding venues and museums, as well as other businesses that serve the B2B business industry that provides benefit platforms to other organisations. He works for Boundless. Good afternoon and welcome, Andy.
Hi, Steve.
And I'm assuming you're the man to go to if I want a nice holiday destination at special discounted price, right?
We've got a beautiful holiday park in the Forest of Dean.
Perfect. And then if I wanted to go further afield, who better than Gillian Cossie, an award-winning solutions-focused data protection officer with over 20 years of practical experience working with the data protection legislation and across a variety of different industries, who currently works for Virgin Atlantic. So we have got, good afternoon, Gillian.
Hi, Steve. Lovely to be here with everyone.
So pleased. So, ladies and gents, we have got quite a fantastic lineup here, and I am really privileged and honoured to be hosting this afternoon's panel. I am myself a former DPO for John Lewis Partnership, Unilever and the Bank of England before setting up Privacy Culture. And one of the things that I have the pleasure of doing now is serving multiple different organisations, acting as a DPO, along with 20 others of my colleagues who are just outside. So if it gets a bit noisy, I'll ask them to hush down a little bit. They do get a little rowdy in the afternoons. But we are really passionate about culture, about making a difference, landing that culture change. And for myself, when we had 85,000 staff, how do you embed that when you have different cultures across functions, across teams, definitely different towns and different countries the cultural differences are really, really visible and apparent. So how do you apply a one-size GDPR size rule set across many different diverse people, industry sectors, and of course, cultures? So my first question to the panel was, how can organizations transform employee attitudes and behaviors to prioritize GDPR privacy compliance? Who would like to answer that question first?
I'll go.
Julian. You moved. So go ahead, Julian. So how do organizations? Yeah.
It won't come as a shock to you. So I am all about the human. I say this a number of times. It's all about the people. It's all about essentially your privacy culture. So I take it from a ground roots level up, and I start with the humans that are involved and making it important to them. It's important to us as data controllers and organizations, but how on earth do you deliver that to a variety of cultures around the world, but also within teams? So that's where I start. That is my fundamental pillar. So I'll start there, but I'll hand over to somebody else to continue.
So I totally agree. Also, for example, for me, data protection is not only to a legal topic. Also, it's not only to understand the meaning of legal text. It's about a process, about data flows, to understand the data flows, about to understand business processes. But it's most about people. Also to gain the trust of the employees and to make this topic, data protection, transparent. And I think it's really important that companies do not dissociate data protection as a privacy culture from their company's culture. It's embedded in the company culture, and it's also important to see data protection not as something worse, bad, of like a burden, but really to think about the positive advantage, the added value of data protection for the big business they are running.
Andy?
I think the point around separate cultures is very much evident in if you work in a business that has multiple sites. Luckily, all of mine are in England, so I don't have to worry about anything outside of the UK. Well, most things outside the UK. But the difference from talking about privacy, talking about data even, to people in an office in London or our headquarters in Brighton by the sunny seaside, not so sunny today, it's totally different to if I walk on site at a spa hotel we own. Their concentration, isolated sites often feel like a completely different business that you walk into. And the point about humanizing it is very much how to get people on board. I hate sometimes appearing, especially when there's a lot of new staff and they've been told you've got to attend some training with me. They're not thrilled to be there for some reason. They don't seem full of joy as I burst through the door. I think I've been to a number of Christmas parties where people will say, "And what do you do?" "I work in data," or "I'm the DPO." And I've had people go, "That sounds boring," and walk off. So the first step I try and take when I'm trying to open up those sessions is not to talk about company policy or things like that. There's often little tools out there that you can use. It was great to go around doing some training when the Cambridge Analytica activity was going on. Everyone was wanting to talk about things. There was some great videos you can use from YouTube that scares the gajibas out of people when they start thinking about their own data. And I often will try and say to people before even talking about it, especially for training sessions, is I want you to learn something that will make a difference in your own life outside of work. Educating people, helping them is about making them protect themselves in their own personal lives, and that naturally helps in the workplace too.
Yeah, so I've really picked up that you're quite right. You know, the fundamental point that you've all emphasised is the people, the employees, and also you've each illustrated how there are other parts to this puzzle, but we are talking about different cultural shifts down to team levels, as well as functions, as well as hotel spas to aeroplanes to services. So that's, I mean, I totally agree. So thank you for that, for grounding us. What role does continuous employee training have in maintaining that high level of data protection standard, and how does it transform the employee knowledge and skill? And Andy, I thought I might ask you to start with that, only because you mentioned about being a party pooper that everyone's trying to avoid. Because you know, so I can really imagine, you know, Andy walks in the room and they're all going, "Oh no, it's Andy. He's going to talk about privacy." So can I ask that? Can I ask you that question first? What role does continuous employee training have for your workforce?
Continuous training is something that's definitely required. If I arrive somewhere, it's an hour or two out of someone's life, and as soon as I've driven off, then it's out of sight, out of mind, potentially. In an office environment, it's much easier to have awareness. We can put posters up, you can do surprise desk inspections, you can leave notes on people's desks, notes in toilets, you can put them anywhere. You can do stands. I've had one of my privacy analysts baking cakes on data protection day. But by doing little bits and more often, it's a constant reminder. And with the threat landscape ever evolving, as soon as the war started, then the number of cyber attacks from Russia we saw increase. And there's always new methods that people are using to try, and whether it's phishing, there's multiple versions of those sorts of attacks. It's the weakest area that we all have. So without doing little and often, almost, not so much little, but often, definitely, serves as a reminder to people. So one of my favorite things to do is some phishing simulations. I think we all like to send those out. We like to toy with hybrid working now, the norm. People have the technology and tend to switch off less at home. So do we find that certain people may, when they shouldn't be out of hours, check their emails, and are they a little bit more slap and not look at it properly, open themselves up to attack? So trying little different things and doing it on an ongoing basis just helps people keep on their toes, I think.
Thank you. Julian, thoughts on this?
I'm totally in agreement with all of the above. I think it's a bit like drip feeding your estates, and I like to build on everyone's knowledge and skill set. So we bring everybody in on day one, and they get data protection training. We also have an online e-learning module which rolls out once a year. So that ticks an awesome compliance box, tick, tick. But that doesn't necessarily help you on an everyday level. If something goes wrong, I can say, yes, that person's done an e-learning module. But did they really understand what they need in their role and how to apply that? So with Andy, I'm definitely a people trainer, and we drip feed. So we tend to do some big sessions. We do sessions within departments or smaller teams, so that the individuals themselves get the data protection knowledge that they need for their role and a bit more. So every time we see them and we build on a little bit more what they've learned before, if they change roles, we do it again because the next team will have it as well. So I layer my approach up a little bit like that.
Agnes, is that the same at Manpower?
Yes, as I think it's important to have a regular training, but as Andy said, we need to have some surprise effects. And I think it's really important to have a tailored program. And it's not, training is not about to be in a classroom and to have intensive training or whatever. It's important to have different formats. So that can be also a communication, an email communication about a special day. And for example, I do a lot of interactive quiz with the employees, and that's really good because it's funny, and they also learn a lot via this quiz, and there also can be an interaction between the employees themselves, where the one employee explain why is he the things like this, and the other has another opinion. So that's really quite really effective, this kind of trainings. Our strategy is to have a really short session, but regularly. And it's important always to bring the awareness so that employees can have adopt the right reflex. And it's really important that it's in the context where they are working. Also with really concrete example. So for example, for my industry, what data can I collect from my candidates? What data can I exchange with other parties? Also that's quite important. Also always to be practical and concrete. Or some basic tips, as really concrete tips about a clean desk, or how to set to manage the settings of a Teams group. That's what they need and what they also adopt.
Some really good examples there. Thank you, each of you. That was really helpful. I certainly heard about the regularity of the training, but also the drip feeding. And I particularly liked your point towards the end there about giving concrete examples in the context of their role. So I thought that was really prevalent, because there's no point training marketing salespeople on HR, how long to retain records, and how to successfully delete. It's very much horses for courses. So I like that, what was coming through. I also liked about the baking cakes, which I think is an absolute must for every organisation. We should have a privacy cake day. And the phishing simulations that you mentioned, Andy, because I think the thing is, you're right, in as much as the, out of sight, out of mind. Privacy is not front of mind if you are working in a back office, or if you're doing some sort of fulfillment, or if you're in a contact center, or whatever it may be, or front of house in a hotel or a spa hotel. Privacy won't be front of mind. So how do we tailor that and make sure the training really is appealing to the people on the ground? And in particular, how does that resonate? And I can't remember which one of you said about trying to make it as personalized as possible. So, doing things that people understand, like how to set your phone settings, privacy settings, those kind of tips, which really help. And I liked the quiz as well. Yeah. Quizzes are a favorite. And I know that, you can have quiz fatigue, too many quizzes, but I like it as a way of reaching different people. So thank you for those examples. So my next question is a bit more sort of coming from the external perspective, because when myself, if I book a flight, or if I want to look for a job, or if I'm looking to benefits through Boundless, the one thing that is really key to me, and obviously I'm biased, is that decision-making process is predicated on the relationship I have with the brand and the trust that I have with that organization about what they're going to do with my data. You know, are they going to sell it on? Those sorts of things. So, as we all know, that's one of the principles of GDPR and the UK Data Protection Act. So, we call that transparency. And how do you, as DPOs, effectively maintain that across your organizations, you know, that transparency? How do you get that down into the people that are frontline or servicing customers in terms of we live and breathe privacy? We don't just say it on our website. You know, how does that translate in terms of transparency? Who wants to start? Gillian, come on. I'll pick on you, Gillian, and then you, Agnes.
That's a very big question that you ask, and it's with difficulty, right? I mean, I don't think any large data controller can say this is the easiest thing in the world to keep your privacy notice up to date and clear and transparent. And then relay that down to your people so that they also know what's going on. And we always need to remember we have employees. So the same thing applies to our customer base as it applies to our employee base. Everything should be open, transparent. And, you know, as most businesses, we all want to be the best in our class as we are. For me, that's definitely linked to trust. I mean, we have big brands. We've got to protect the brand, and very big part of that is exactly what you said. Our customers, before they want to come and book with us, they're going to think, can I trust? Can I trust them with my data? Can I trust them with my holiday? Can I trust them with my flight? What if something happens? So for me, I have processes set up internally which help me to keep the transparency, to help me with my register of processing activities, so that I can always try to make sure that my privacy notice is totally up to date and accurate. And that it's clear to the customer that we're using clear language, you know, plain English to say what we want to say, that we try to not have much legalese going on as best as possible, because that I don't personally think that that's fair for a consumer. So our privacy process of projects that come up and systems, etc., we all follow the data protection impact assessment. And I definitely use that as one of my biggest tools to try to help keep that transparency. Most of it flows through us, so we get the picture. And as much as, you know, a lot of the business, and probably a lot of us as DPOs find data protection impact assessments annoying at times and laborious, they're actually very good for what they do. They articulate exactly what's going on, what data are you processing, and for what reason. And you can take what's the objective I'm trying to get to and all of that. So I kind of use that to get to my transparency piece, which I can then relay through the organization.
Thank you. Agnes, thoughts on that?
Also, I think it's important to have policies in place and guidelines and processes when you, for example, when you want to establish a new tool, you have to go through a process where there is an evaluation by data protection and info security. But I think it's also important regarding towards the employees to have a central repository with information that are kept up to date, such like an intranet, SharePoint intranet, where there is also concrete examples and FAQ that help them for their daily business, and where you can also save time, gain time. And also in the organization to keep privacy as a transparency, it's important to have also regular exchange with the management, and to have, for example, a data protection steering committee that encompassed, so that cover all the key stakeholder like IT, like HR, and you have a regular meeting where you can speak about discuss the status of your roadmap and discuss where what are the next steps, where are we good, or what do we need, and what you need also as DPO. And where our awareness is, and what's the next step. I think it's also important to have transparency on all these different levels.
Andy, any thoughts on that?
I mean, yes, I totally agree with. Obviously, I would do everything that's been said. I think from the word go, the first thing I do as part of a new induction to a new employee is to point them at the employee privacy notice, so they're aware of what their own rights are. It puts them to think about our members, our customers, our guests. It's much easier when you, at that very first point, say, hey, actually, you've got rights. You have to have your data treated. Did you know there was a privacy notice when you applied for your interview? 99.9% will say, no, I didn't know that. And then we'll say, we were upfront from the start. But to Gillian's point with the DPIA process as well, I, like many people, probably have been at the tail end of processes or projects where suddenly, oh, could you just sign this DPIA off? It's going live tomorrow. And through education, you remind them you're not the approver of it. You're there merely to advise. It's not the accountable person is the one who's needs to approve it. But we've made a massive shift through investing in technology that every single project, regardless whether even personal data is involved or not, every new initiative, any business change has to follow our DPI process. Because as part of that, we've expanded it so that there's a section that is the briefing that IT would need to develop anything or how something's integrated. There's a section that would be, it almost serves now as the update for the whole company who are involved in these things. So our comms team will know what messaging to put. We know what privacy to update in the notice. So it's almost a business document that now goes through every department. It means it's taken away the old attitude that people would think of it on an individual basis and make sure everyone's joining together. So IT know what they need to do. We know what needs to be advised, as in, why are you asking for someone's telephone number when you don't need that? And it just gives everyone a chance, a much more openness, and it adds that whole transparency amongst the business. And hopefully we see more people educating themselves amongst themselves and realizing, oh yes, I don't need to ask that. I just need the minimum to get things done, and so on.
Yeah, no, thank you. And so, I mean, this kind of lends itself well to tone from the top, which, you know, let's face it, if we don't have, you mentioned it, Agnes, I think stakeholders and committees, if we don't have that structure in place to support these programs, it becomes quite tricky to actually implement change. But would you say that that kind of stakeholder support, would you say that was, you know, crucial, or is it can you get around it? Can you, you know, if you don't have that, for our listeners listening today, they might not have the support of their chief exec, or they might sort of, maybe they do on paper, but certainly, you know, the actual the realism of implementing and driving through training and mandating that, it might not be the same. But what's your thoughts on that? I'll start with you, Agnes.
Yes, I think, in my opinion, it's really crucial to have this support of the stakeholder. So that's really easier than for the DPO. That's also a question of accountability. So that key stakeholders are aware of their responsibility. But that's also on the other way. I think to get also this support, that's also the part of the DPO, the mindset of the DPO. I think it's important that the DPO is also business oriented and not only the compliance guy. So you need to bring the right to bring an added value also for the stakeholder, and also to highlight the right risk from the business perspective, so that it's really always effective what you do, and that's really important. So it's not only the stakeholder but also the part of the DPO to have the right mindset. So to be successful, yes.
Gillian, what about Virgin Atlantic to you? Would you say, what's your experience?
So I definitely think leadership support is very important and critical, really, in any organization. I'm lucky I do have leadership support here. But I think you also mentioned there are companies who don't, and there are DPOs out there who might be in smaller organizations where it's a bit more difficult to get leaders support.
Yes,
and you know, a DPO's role is a pretty challenging one. It's not for the faint-hearted, and
we're all laughing because we all resonate so well.
But part of how we've all got to where we are is going through the ranks. We've been through it. We've had to wade through the weeds, and we've had to fight. And, you know, we have all fought great fights on our journey to where we are today. And so for the DPOs who may not immediately have leadership support at the top and board level, there will always be support, but whether it's, like you said, Steve, just on paper or genuine support. And for those who don't have genuine support, my advice for DPOs is keep fighting. Keep fighting for it. Start with your ground roots. Train everybody. Train them all. Train the leadership teams as far as you can get. Train them, because the more we can get into their hearts and minds with DP, making it personal, making it commercial. What are the risks? What are the commercial risks, the brand risks, the customer and employee risk? That just steps up to help it. So absolutely, leadership is really important. But for those who don't have it right now, please don't lose faith. You will get it. It will come. Just keep going.
Yes. No, thank you. Andy, a quick point on that one? Or are you just so blessed with your leadership that they just say, yes, Andy, that's the strategy. Go ahead. Here's your budget and your resource.
I am quite lucky. I do have support.
Well, there you go.
I think, like most people, there was the worry and concern when GDPR came in, and certainly the CFO would have been counting the pennies. Whereas through being able to demonstrate privacy is not something, it's not a blocker, it's an enabler when used correctly and followed correctly. It was the best quick win I had was to be able to take short examples. It could be something as simple as someone selling event tickets. All you had to do was just add in do you want to join our main list and hear about the next event? And suddenly you've got a commercial avenue that's just not being explored. And that will usually light up the leadership team's eyes quite rapidly and hear the ka-ching. So play to the strengths of the individuals is my recommendation.
No, I like that. And I particularly like the ka-ching. Especially
I didn't do that.
I used to work for John Lewis. So, of course, it was all about the tills, you know, or EPOS, as the posh name for them now, the cash tills, where we used to take money. So that's good. I'm going to now sort of, in the last 10 minutes, I'm just going to orientate the conversation a little bit towards the kind of more practical aspects of this, because I think you've really nicely captured the concepts of this is an ongoing thing. This is not, there's no simple solution. This is just tireless, banging the drum, getting the messaging right, making those appeals to different audiences with different slightly messages. Timing is everything. Blackmailing them with cakes, phishing simulations, quizzes, whatever it takes, you know, essentially. And I think that's really does recognise the talent that you brought that got recognised in last year's Picasso Awards. and that's why you're here today. So I can see that coming through in leaps and bounds. So what I wanted to just talk about a little bit was really about sort of how do we now take those. One of the biggest challenges that we have in our staff, in our employees, is this aspect of control or perceived control. So in some organizations that I work with, and certainly where I used to work, they would think, well, that's the DPO's problem, not mine. I don't, there's sort of accountability, slopey shoulders type of thing. Well, that's not, I don't have to worry about that. That's your problem, not mine. So I just want to ask from a practical perspective, perhaps start with you, Gillian. What can you get around that to get from that slopey shoulders kind of, accountability aspect from the employees?
Okay. It might be anti-bribery and competitive. Oh, back in the room on a serious note. Okay, so it is tough. It is very tough. But I rely a lot on relationships and connection.
Okay.
And building relationships with the teams, so that it's not a data protection team and a business. We are all one together. We are all spokes in that wheel.
You're all, gotcha. Yeah.
And without one, the other one doesn't operate. Without data protection, the aircraft don't get in the sky either, because we don't sign off the contracts, or without the cleaners, the aircraft also doesn't leave. So everybody has a role to play. So yes, in every organization, it usually can start with the data protection team job to deal with data. But again, what we've been talking about the whole session, the layering up and the drip feeding of the training, and the who's responsible for what, and the DPIA processes, all these things build together like a wonderful puzzle. And when you find a sweet spot, eventually when the puzzle's built, then it's hooray, everybody fits together. And there will always be some pushback of who owns what. But I do try to work through on that commercial level. What happens if this happens to this data set or this system? Who is that person that's ultimately responsible for that? Who is going to have the customers or our employees shouting at them? Who's responsible for the process? So that's the lines I work.
Very good. Very diplomatically handled there, Gillian. Andy, any thoughts? And then Agnes. Andy?
Yeah, definitely ownership is key. I try and empower each business unit to be responsible for what they do themselves. We obviously advise, we have training, we have policies, procedures, the whole framework. But for instance, our call center, if they received notification of an incident, which might be someone received someone else's letter or something like that, I expect them to know the process to follow, the incident reports, the investigation, how it's all managed. But one of the things I like to try and do, especially for the non-office based locations, is take some of the responsibility about some of the things away from them. So if someone has a privacy concern, if I said to you, I have a swimming pool with underwater cameras, you might be slightly freaked out. They're actually underwater sensors for an anti-drowning system. So they're not underwater cameras, but I didn't feel comfortable that a receptionist is trying to answer questions from someone who's concerned that they might be being filmed underwater. So there's an open channel that people can contact me directly. I've got a standardized process that explains it. Only one person has ever taken me up on it. But rather than people feeling they have to explain things, or if they receive a right of erasure request, is actually they don't have to respond directly to the individual. I'll happily take that on. I'll happily speak to that person and make sure that they're fully looked after. So trying to get people, directors, leaders, to be accountable, make sure they understand that, scare them with the privacy directive that individuals can get fined, not just a business. That's always a good one. Then there's a fight over who wants to be CMO anymore. But also giving that little bit extra and just making sure that people feel they're not isolated. It's not, here's the training, you can't ask questions. We're here, we're friendly.
Yeah.
I may be a party pooper, but we're here to help.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. And Agnes, what's your thoughts on that?
So what we have put in place is, for example, we have for every processing, we have a business process owner. Also from the business side is, for example, responsible to conduct the data processing agreement with the vendor. And we have for the technical side, we have an asset owner. And they all work together with the DPO, also that's what we call the trio infernal. And that's really important for the accountability. And we made a lot of progress with this structure. And that's also with this business process owner and asset owner, it's also good for the company because it's not only based for data protection, it's for all other topic related to the business. And what I also do is to support, for example, when we have a DPA, a data processing agreement, I review this. But then I review this also together with the business process owner, and we go through the information that are required. For example, what data is processed. So I explain what is this, and it is filled out by the business process owner with my support. So I do not do this myself, but I support, I help, I explain, and they are able to fill this out. And the next time, that's the right question, what they will ask. Or when we do the raw pass, that's the same. As I do not send the raw file to the owner and let him alone. I organize a session with him, and we go through the ROPA, and I can explain why is a privacy notice here necessary, why is it important, or do we have a data transfer, what is required, and when we want to appoint new subcontractors, we will need to notify as a controller and all these things. So it's really to be near to the business. So it takes a lot of time at the beginning, but it gets only better. But it's always an ongoing process.
And I think thank you, Agnes. That's a really good point, because that brings us close to the end of our session here today. So before I ask the question for your top 3 tips from each of you, I think I will just say that what I've learned from today's session so far is that, well, first of all, we really do, it's an ongoing process. It's not, it's not a do it once. Okay, I've trained everybody. I can sit back and just let privacy happen. That's very apparent, although that would be nice from time to time. It is about engagement at different levels and different audiences, and changing the narrative or the context to suit the context of their working environment, which came through. We've also heard about different techniques such as quizzes, phishing simulations, baking cookies, all of that drip feed that you mentioned, and also about accountability, ownership, both from the individual employee, which you're all some of the parts, if you like, and the relationship and the importance of having that leadership support, the proper structures in place, the committees, if you like, the risk or the audit committee or whoever is it, or privacy committee, where you can escalate those issues up, and they can also support you in this ongoing challenge. this lovely environment that we're in. And so we've also had an audience from the a question from the audience as well. And I'm not sure. I'm going to try and answer that. Thank you, Tess. It is a good question. Could you share your personal challenge of implementing and enforcing a culture of privacy with the use of AI? So I think what I'll do is take that question, but I'll take that into your top tips, because if, like me, what I'm seeing across 30 different organizations is that AI is kind of new, as we know, and the ways of working are still, the paint is still wet, as we would say, and some of those processes are being now engineered to allow for that. And I think a couple of you mentioned about the DPIA process and the importance of going through that formal rigor and risk assessment to help people think differently and then behave differently around the privacy risks that they're introducing, sometimes inadvertently and sometimes maliciously. But so if I think about the top 3 things that you would say to a data protection officer who, I don't know, they might be at the beginning of their journey, or they might be new to an organization, what would be the top 3 things that you would do, say, differently, and you would like to pass on and share with our audience? So I'm going to start with Andy, and then I'll go Gillian, I'll end on you, Agnes, if that's okay. So
top 3 I'd use is I am a massive fan of the ICO's accountability framework. I think it's a very useful tool for across a wide range of categories to use as a benchmark to make sure that you are able to not just meet but exceed the expectations that the regulator in the UK has. It's very useful for making sure that the accountability group are identified as well, so it really helps tackle that area. Making sure that it's an open and honest environment. If an incident happens, that people learn from it. That if people encounter, especially when it comes to any simulations of attacks, or if someone notices something, a trend, it could be that people feel confident to speak up, to share their experiences that everyone can learn from. Because the best way of learning is from real life experience.
Yeah.
In regards to AI, which if we're throwing into that question as well, obviously it's the #1 topic, I think it's fair to say, for a lot of us at the minute, as most of the board will be leaping up and down in excitement going, this is going to change the world, whereas other of us are less so. We recently took an AI readiness assessment from a third party, which helped us to examine the areas that we need to look at before introducing AI. But like every business, you have to understand that AI is already in use, whether you like it or not. People in your business are using it, probably open source. So making sure that you're on the journey of educating people that don't do a performance review in ChatGPT, for example. Make sure that people know that company information is not for external AI tools. So you put something in AI, it doesn't mean it stays in your environment. So if you're like us, a Microsoft company, very heavily based, Copilot is the big thing that everyone's looking at. #1 is make sure that data classification has been set up, because without it, then you could be exposing all sorts to it. So really spend time on that.
Brilliant tip, thank you. I think that was really practical, and couldn't agree with you more. So Gillian, top 3 tips, last one maybe being around AI, but don't feel you need it.
Top 3, and you can use it for including AI, all top 3.
Perfect. Okay, yes.
Never take anything at face value. Whatever the business brings to you as DPO or a DP team, never fear to ask questions and keep asking questions. Often what's brought to us is not what we actually need to get to, or as detailed as we need. And for DPOs starting out, try not advise in silo. So don't just take the law plus the business and the operation and what it needs to do, and marry them up together. Tip 2 is be a friend, not a foe. Build those relationships, use those relationships. They will come in super handy. Work with the business. The more we integrate into the operation, the easier our jobs are, the more privacy by design and privacy culture is fully embedded into that operation. And number 3 is keep learning. There was so much new legislation coming out. There was AI, there was all sorts of things. The world is not stopping around us. So keep learning and keep up to date.
Fantastic. Brilliant. These are priceless. So the pleasure is yours, Agnes. Last.
Yeah. So I would say my tips is to have a mindset as a facilitator, to have a feeling for technical topics and process, also to be aware, also to be ready also to learn about how technology works and what are the business needs and the business process, also to understand also the business you are advising. That's, I think, important to be also solution oriented, also to keep the things practical and feasible, and not really to try to be theoretical and to be really dogmatical. And regarding the AI, also I think it's good to have really the discussion currently at the moment, how to use this tool, what does that mean? But as Andy said, it's not new. Also we already have AI in some tools that we use, but that's at the moment really to educate the employees, and that's also the same for privacy, to educate how to think, to use tools, also that you need to use tools that are evaluated, because we have the security measures for this tool. We have the contractual agreement to use this tool. So I think that's important. And not to use AI tools that are for free on the internet.
Yes. So I thought, thank you for all three of you for those. I'll just repeat them back for the audience, making notes as I was, and then you can compare notes afterwards. But I certainly, I liked your point about, I think a lot of people don't understand that ChatGPT is a bit like posting it out there on a postcard. It's out there. So whatever you do, don't put confidential information in there. So I thought that was really, really good tip. So I love what you're saying about the ICO accountability framework. I've got one of my clients who love it, but I think it is a bit like Marmite. You either love it or you hate it, because I've got other clients that won't go near it because it's too lengthy, over 300 control requirements. So it can take an awful long time when you're in different jurisdictions as well. So, but I do like it. I love the openness around the incident management, Andy, about sort of learning from those incidents, not making it a faux pas, just put your hands up and say, look, this is what I've done. That's brilliant, because we all learn from that. And that helps you, because when you do make those mistakes, which we all do, that's really relevant. And then obviously educating, as you said, around Copilot, around the use of the tools for your staff. And then we seem to have lost Agnes, who's on the permanent circle of death. Then back to you, Gillian. So the face value, I like that. Let's be approachable. Ask questions, as you put. Be a friend, not a foe, which I thought was wonderful, and work with the business. And then above all, which we all have to do, which was why I was out in Brussels at the AI Governance Summit last week. We've got to keep learning because, it's a constant battle. And then just to pay homage to Agnes, who has dropped off, probably some sort of cyber attack. No, I'm joking. It's, it's probably the kids have come home and have gone on the internet. That's more likely. That's what happens at my house. So I liked what Agnes was saying about the mindset. Oh, she's here. So I was just speaking about you, Agnes. Glad you're back. The mindset as a facilitator, and then be aware of the technology. Absolutely crucial to that, because more and more, we are going to be asked, especially around AI. I can now do this with this data. Is that ethical? Is that appropriate? Is it high risk? Obviously, but educating your employees was your last point, and I think the fantastic points, practical tips from all three of you. And as I said in my statement on LinkedIn earlier, I was looking forward to this afternoon, because whenever I speak to like-minded individuals, to people who are thought leaders and certainly leaders in the DPO space, I always come away learning something. So on behalf of Privacy Culture, I want to thank you, all of you, for coming this afternoon, for giving up your time. And time is a challenge for all of us. So I really am grateful. I think we've certainly covered off how to embed a culture of privacy. Thank you to our audience. Sorry that we didn't get a chance to do all of the questions. It's always time is against us, but it's just left to me to thank you. I'm Steve Wright. We will be having another webinar in July. So that's all to do with how do you know what good looks like? So sort of similar theme, but building on today. And we're going to try to do these webinars regularly for the remainder of this year. So tune in for those. And of course, if you want to get in contact with me or my team, then please do so. Or likewise with these three wonderful people who are fonts of knowledge. So thank you again for joining us. And we're going to sign out now. Bye for now, but thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.